If you want to sum up the University of San Diego right now, it's heart, it's fight, and it's razor-thin margins. In the span of 1 week, the Toreros pulled off a miraculous overtime comeback at Pepperdine and then suffered a brutal overtime collapse at home against Oregon State. Same team, same week, two wildly different endings. The high point was Pepperdine. Let's start with in Malibu because that win said a lot about this team. They were down 9 with under 5 minutes left. Tyler Johnson fouled out, who we talked about last week, is carrying the team offensively for this Toreros offense. And ESPN Analytics gave USD a 6% chance to win. And then what happened? Tenari Lane, he went nuclear. Season high, 21 points, multiple clutch threes late, and in overtime. Asan Giap puts up an absolute monster line, 21 points, 17 boards, 9 for 10 shooting, 5 Toreros score in double figures. USD executes overtime near perfectly. That's not luck. That's toughness. That's a team that believes even when the numbers say you're cooked. But then Saturday happened. The gut punch against Oregon State. They come up to Saturday. They're up 10 points with 128 left at home. Game is basically in your hands, and then it slips away. Oregon State hits 3 straight threes. USD commits 20 turnovers. Momentum flips. Even with Adrian McIntyre scoring 11 straight in overtime, it's not enough, and it hurts you even more in the standings because it was right there. USD did a lot right. They won the rebounding battle. They held Oregon State to 40% shooting. They got rim protection from Tim Moore Jr. and his 5 blocks. But the late game execution, that's the difference between climbing the standings and staying stuck. And you're trying to play for buys and multiple buys in the West Coast Conference tournament. And Oregon State is a direct competitor. Now, you still get to play Oregon State one more time in Corvallis. But, Frank, this is a tough loss on Saturday after what was a very thrilling win in Malibu earlier last week.
Yeah, I got to watch a little bit of that game while I was preparing for UCSD versus CSUN. And that just looked so brutal, so painful, that loss against Oregon State, because the game was in your hands. You're up. I looked with you're up 8 with 50 seconds to go. I turn around and you're going to overtime. I'm like, that's insane. The turnaround there. But then again, you had the big comeback win against Pepperdine. You go into overtime against them and pull it off. It's a wild, Jekyll and Hyde week for the Toreros men's basketball side.
Yeah, and the scary part is, of course, like with Oregon State, the loss to Oregon State. I mean, you're sitting now at 4-7 at West Coast Conference play. You could be 5-6 right now, and right out of a spot to have not only a day off Thursday, but even a day off Friday, and maybe even a day off on Saturday, because everybody is so close. Right now, you're in 9th place, and in 9th place, you're the first team. You're the last team in the group, like first team to not get a bye in the West Coast Conference tournament. You're right now playing on Thursday, but it's tightly packed between 5th and 10th. I mean, a couple of wins can swing some things, and all of a sudden, instead of playing on Thursday of the West Coast Conference tournament, you're playing on Saturday, or maybe you're playing on Friday, and that all adds up when you are going through the West Coast Conference tournament and then eventually having to run into a team like Santa Clara or St. Mary's or Gonzaga. You want to play them with as fresher legs as possible, and right now, with that loss, San Diego finds himself with the hardest path through the West Coast Conference tournament.
Yeah, absolutely. And then you're coming up and you're playing St. Mary's at St. Mary's coming up this week. No pressure in that game. You can only supersede expectations going up against St. Mary's, and it's a great test to try to see what you got for the rest of this conference schedule.
Yeah, you only have to play St. Mary's once in conference play. You're knocking off the list. This was one of the games during your remaining games of the season that you expect that they're going to lose, right? From a fan perspective, obviously the team's not thinking that. So a loss up there is not going to kill you. It's a quad 1 game. It's a quad 1 opportunity. St. Mary's is very, very good, but they have to be able to answer after that. They got to play Oregon State well, and then they play the bottom of the schedule. They play LMU twice, who's behind him in the standings, and Portland twice, who's also behind him in the standings. 1 game against USF, 1 game against Oregon State. That is where you make your hay to try to play yourself out of Thursday. Now for women's basketball, they are competing through adversity. They're dealing with a lot of different things in terms of challenges than the men's team. They're trying to survive without key players, but they're still competing. They hung tough at first place Oregon State before shooting dried up. Then at Portland, freshman Olivia Owens dropped a career high 27 points. USD rebounded its way into the game. Fourth quarter lead slips away. We have seen that time and time again for the women's basketball program, but they're getting better. They're just coming up a little bit short, but they have a chance too to play out a Thursday with the way that the standings are.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's a fighting team. This is a group of fighters rebounding with the best teams in the West Coast Conference. Young players growing up fast under a first-year head coach. So now they get the chance to play some home games, and it really matters being able to come home to the Jenny Craig Pavilion and get some games in front of your home crowd.
They're so close, and hopefully
Yep.
next week we're talking about more wins when it comes to San Diego.